when we first cut the movie together, once the shooting had finished, I think we were like looking at a 2.5-hour movie, which was too long, and it felt too long. You know, there were bits that were slow, bits that were clearly didn't need, and we had to be tough. And that's, you know, part of the process of filmmaking. I mean, you know, making movies is not about keeping every second that you filmed in there. It's about making something that works for an audience. And generally, you've got to, you know, start to attack things that you're quite fond of. And the easiest way to do this shortening process is often to remove characters or to remove entire subplots, because if you go in there and you start trimming little bits and pieces off all the scenes, the film can become very bitsy and rough, and it doesn't, you know, it doesn't really work to do it that way. The first victim of this process was the gatekeeper. Two things were apparent. One was that generally the stuff with the gatekeeper was not essential to the movie. Like, we could take the gatekeeper out and still have pretty much exactly the same story. And secondly, the gatekeeper seemed a little strange to us when we looked at the finished movie, because he is the only character in the film, the only ghostly character that we had who was kind of not human. You know, we had this rule that you die, you become a ghost, you end up in the cemetery or in Frank's house or whatever, but you're there as a dead person. And yet, you know, what was the gatekeeper? He was like a funny idea that we had, but it didn't kind of make a lot of sense. And so he was targeted for the ruthless process of elimination, and that's what happened to him. We should have a look at some of the gatekeeper, you know, scenes now. The important thing to remember is that I don't think any of these shots were actually finished. They were not completed for the film. They exist only as temp shots, which are very rough, crude effect shots that we put together just so we could cut the film. So with that in mind, let's have a look at some of the stuff. There were two sequences with the gatekeeper. One when Frank and Ray are first, you know, coming into the cemetery, and they've just left Frank's car and they're walking up the path, and suddenly the gatekeeper jumps out to intercept them.
Wait, god damn it! Hey, what did I just tell you, huh?
Hey, stop! State your business.
Yeah, he's with me.
You're not welcome here, Bannister.
Oh, come on, it's the guy's funeral. It'll be 10 minutes tops. Give him a break, huh?
Come back!
So that was just the introduction to the gatekeeper, and his big sequence happened later in the movie when Frank has now become a ghost and returns to the cemetery at night. This scene was originally conceived a little differently to how it exists in the final film, so it's interesting to look at it from that point of view. It starts out with Frank actually looking at the cop car sort of from high in a tree. He's a ghost, he's arrived at the cemetery, and he's keeping an eye on Lucy, who's in the car.
I'm doing this? I'm making a car move with the power of my mind? Yes! No! Wait!
State your business.
It's me! Damn it, it's Bannister!
Holy Jesus! Who have we got here?
Listen to me, Hiles. I haven't got time for this crap. There's an evil spirit coming down that hill right now, and I think he's pissed.
Shut up, you subhuman emanation! No one speak unless spoken to! You unorganized, grabastic, gobbled, teleplasmic shit! If there was an evil spirit loose in this town, I would be negligent in my duty! Are you accusing me of professional incompetence? Or are you saying that I am one prized piece of anus bread? Put this stinking piece of spook goop back in the goddamn ground!
No, it's not my grave!
Jesus H. Christ! Who Who in the hell are you? Sound off like you've got a pair!
A similar fate, unfortunately, happened to the character of the judge as well. I mean, the judge is a wonderful character in the film, and we had a lot of fun shooting his sequences, but it became apparent when we looked at the final cut of the film that that there was a lot of stuff that was happening with him that was really not part of the narrative drive of the film, and even though it gave us a lot of pain to do so, we went through a process of trimming his scenes out. It's kind of interesting to look at the film, in a sense, the film that never was, by going through some of the judge footage. In fact, the first time that he appears in the film is different. At the moment he comes racing into the living room firing his pistols, we see that his jaw is missing. The dog has his jaw. And that was originally going to be the second time we saw him. The first time was when Frank was on his way to the shower. The shots of the dog were never finished in these scenes either.
Oh, man. Good morning, Judge. Dog's got your job on.
After that introduction, the judge was pretty much in the movie as he is now. We meet him, he talks to Frank by the fireside. And then I remember there was a little piece that's missing from the film that I always liked, where he's in the car with the ghosts after they've encountered the Reaper for the first time.
That was not an emanation. That was some sort of a spirit. A dark spirit.
Dark spirit, my ass. That was the Grim Reaper, son. The specter of death.
That little piece of dialogue was just, taken out for pacing reasons. The action then goes to the museum, and we have it pretty much the way it is, with the judge coming in, shooting the Reaper, and enabling Frank to escape. The sequence, however, did not finish with the judge being chopped in half as it does now. It actually carried on a little bit further.
Judge! God damn it! I've lost my vitals!
Get out of here!
Bastard!
We quite like the idea that the judge, even though he's chopped in half, is still alive, because he is a ghost after all. However, being a half guy is probably a bit of a handicap, and so the judge heads off to the cemetery. We don't see any of that. We just, he lets us know that it's time to head back to the coffin. And he was due to make a surprise appearance in the cemetery later on in the movie. That begins when Frank Bannister is thrown into the ground by the gatekeeper.
Judge!
Will you get the hell out of my grave?
Judge, goddammit, listen to me!
Take your filthy fingers out of the lady's blouse, mister. God damn it! No!
Evening.
There were a couple of interesting little shots with the judge towards the end of the cemetery scene as well, when Frank is talking to the Johnny Bartlett face.
I gotta hand it to you, Frank. You've taken out death himself.
This ain't death. Who are you?
It was kind of difficult to actually shoot those shots with John Astin in a way that, you know, it was believable that he was just walking on his hands. And we made quite a complicated blue screen rig, which involved John swinging from a little sort of a crane so that his weight would be floating and he was able to use his hands to be, you know, lifting himself off the ground with. And it was quite ingenious, and it would have worked quite well if we'd actually finished all the shots. And the judge's final appearance in the film was going to be in the denouement, where in addition to having Frank's house being torn down and the sheriff turning up to say farewell, there was going to be a sort of an emotional farewell, a touching little moment between Frank and the judge.
I always said you'd never finish that house, Frank.
I'll be right back. Come on, back. I'd call it finished, Judge.
Just goodbye, son. I'm hitting the trail with Rustler.
Aren't you gonna need your legs?
Well, me and my vitals have come to a parting of the ways. They're going east, and I'm heading west with Rustler. Ha!
I'm really glad that John Astin's lovely work as the judge can be seen finally, you know, on this Laserdisc. The editing process didn't stop with the cut that we were doing in New Zealand. We had to take the film to the States for the dreaded previews. Now, we had Bob Zemeckis there, and I found the process very interesting because, you know, you don't spend 2 years designing a car and then put it on the market without a test drive. You know, it makes sense to actually find out if there's any faults, to find out whether the audience is responding in the way that you want them to respond, because you certainly lose objectivity when you've been working on a film for so long. And the previews didn't really cause us any great concern. One interesting thing that did develop was this whole issue of the swastika that was on the palm of Dammer's hand.
Milton Dammers has a swastika on his hand right here. Little crudely made Manson-esque swastika. And there was, actually in this special edition, there's a little more explanation of it. I hold it up to have her stop yelling, and she sees in the rearview mirror, as well as the audience, that I have a swastika there. And I explain that my first undercover assignment was being part of the Manson family at Spawn Ranch, 1969.
I was the family's sex slave for 6 months. 6 months. In the service of my country, disguised as a filthy hippie.
It was interesting because when they tested this movie, audiences didn't get it. They misunderstood. They thought I was a Nazi because I had a swastika. And maybe because of the hair, it sort of went right along with it. I mean, all they saw was the visual, and they didn't get the verbal explanation. So it was taken out, but I guess it's back in.
Not all the scenes that we trimmed out of the film are quite as exciting as the, as the gatekeeper or even the Dammer swastika stuff. Some of them are a lot more mild, and you just simply don't need them. And a really good example of that was a very brief scene with Lucy as she arrives at the police station. Now, when you're writing a script, you always get bogged down in the logistics, and we thought, well, she's not going to be able to run into the police station and go straight to Frank's cell because they wouldn't allow her to. So we've got to explain how she actually gets to the cell, and so we shot this little scene.
Dr. Linsky.
I need to speak to Frank Bannister now.
Agent Dammer says he's to have no visitors.
Look, I'm his doctor.
Sorry, ma'am. Agent Dammers will be back in 40 minutes. You could take a seat and wait for him.
Are you trying to deny me access to my patient?
But when you see the movie playing, you just realise, no one cares. It's a really good example of the difference between screenwriting and trying to theorise everything in the story with actually watching a movie. You just don't care, so you can easily just lift that type of stuff out.
The mystery heart condition that has killed over 30 people in less than 4 years has claimed another victim. Doctors are baffled as to why seemingly fit and healthy people are suffering massive heart attacks. Many of Fairwater's residents are claiming that the shadow of death has once again descended on the town. What's the shadow of death stuff? I don't like it.
It's what they're saying, Miss Reese-Jones. There's a lot of scared people out there.
By now, most people have probably seen, this extended version of the film, which we included in this special edition Laserdisc. And, those were all scenes that we took out originally, like the Frank with the letter from the bank, and the false reaper gag that the ghosts pull on him, and the driving with the judge and speeding up through the funeral procession. They were lifts that we did simply for pace. They were scenes that we didn't think were necessary, and I certainly think theatrically the film is better without those scenes in. But it was fun to sort of include them in this Laserdisc because in themselves they're quite fun, and I think the medium of a Laserdisc, of watching a film on TV, and especially a film that you've presumably already seen and you can now see a slightly different version of it, is part of the fun. And while the theatrical version is still like the director's cut of the film, I'm really happy that some of this stuff, we were able to include here because, it was kind of fun.